thinking. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Michaela Valletta, which a lot of you know who follow me, but some of you may be new to the page. I talk about all kinds of topics, social issues, things, and a lot of you know that I love hip hop. But I'm sitting here with my dad, who I introduced yesterday, but it's a new video. So
Her dad, the intellectual gangster.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. He's an intellectual gangster. So he's a former journalist.
An award-winning journalist, twice nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in 2 different areas. But you can read all about me on my bio. Just go to Playtell Benjamin. No, not Playtell. P-L-A-Y-T-H-E-L-L. P-L-A-Y-T-H-E-L-L. S, no apostrophe, Playtell's Commentaries, COMMENTARIES.wordpress.com. And when you go there, you'll see things that says Playtell Benjamin, Independent Public Intellectual. Click on that, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about me, and then some. All right. But I'm a former professor of history, a former professor of journalism. I'm an award-winning journalist, twice nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in 2 different areas for explanatory journalism, feature writing, and distinguished commentary. I have lectured at Harvard, the Sorbonne in Paris. My work has been taught at Columbia University. So I ain't just nobody out here just talking shit. You understand what I'm saying? I got credentials. All right, so Go ahead. Now I won't be talking shit because I got to do it because I'm used to it.
And right now we are in Harlem, Sugar Hill to be exact.
And Paul Robeson's old apartment.
Sugar Hill to be exact, on the border of Harlem in a neighborhood called Washington Heights, right across from the South Bronx. So like when I look out the window, I can see Yankee Stadium. I can hear, I grew up hearing Yankee games. And
and hip-hop was born right outside our window.
Yeah, hip-hop came from the South Bronx. But a lot of people don't know, when people talk about uptown, like when people talk about New York City, uptown is Upper Manhattan, which is Harlem, Washington Heights, and then the Bronx. So we're all kind of united. So
the Bronx is across the river, the East River. The Bronx is the Bronx. This is Manhattan. All right, the Bronx is like one of the outer, what they call the outer boroughs, the boonies. All right, this is the apple here, Manhattan.
Yeah,
right?
It is. But what I'm trying to say though is that uptown.
I just don't want people to get confused.
No, the Bronx is a different borough, right? But I'm saying we're very close. Like Upper Manhattan is very close to the South Bronx. Like you could practically, like you don't even notice the bridge going over the river. Whereas when you go from Lower Manhattan to Brooklyn, it's a much longer bridge. You know, there's more water that you have to go over. So I'm just saying uptown is a certain flavor. So the Bronx hip hop was born in the South Bronx, but then I would say salsa music came from Harlem and the Bronx. Would you say salsa music came from uptown?
Salsa music came from what they call El Barrio over there in Spanish Harlem. Yeah,
okay.
Right.
East Harlem. Okay.
And then there's a lot of of salseros lived in the Bronx as the Spanish population spread in the Bronx. But the main place, that's why you see when you go over there, you see streets named after Machito and after El Rey, Tito Puente and whatnot, because that was the original home of salsa.
But Latin jazz predated salsa, and Latin jazz had a lot of Afro-American artists, and they lived in Harlem, didn't they?
No, see, first of all, they call what they call El Barrio now, they call Spanish Harlem. Then.
Yeah, I know.
It was all Harlem. Now, Latin jazz was invented by Dizzy Gillespie and Mario Bowser.
Mario Bowser, isn't he Cuban?
He's a great Afro-Cuban. Yes,
yeah.
It was called Cubop in the beginning. Right? It was a mixture of the Afro-Cuban son montono and the new style of jazz called bebop that was created by Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. As a matter of fact, there's an album called Machito and Bird at Birdland. Machito at Birdland, where it was the great Machito Orchestra, Afro-Cuban. See, there were 2 orchestras that first epitomized what we now call Latin jazz, which is then called Cubop, and that was some great music. It was deeper than a lot of what's being played now. These are really great musicians. That's not to say there are no great musicians now, but these were the top virtuosos at that time, and a style of music, bebop, which a lot of musicians can't play today. Even jazz musicians can't play. It's extremely difficult. And it was really invented by Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker, Kenny Clark on the drums, the great Oscar Pettiford on bass, Monk, Thelonious Monk on piano, Bud Powell. You know, they created a really highly virtuosic form of music. And what happened was, Dizzy and Mario Bowser were both playing in the great Chick Webb band. This was the area of the swing bands, the dance bands. And they got to talking one day, and Mario Bowser said, why don't you come go, they had a vacation. He said, why don't you come go home to Cuba? Because this time you could just go back and forward to Cuba like you can go to Puerto Rico now, right? And said, why don't you come home with me on the vacation? So he went with him, Dizzy Gillespie went with him to Cuba, and he heard, you know, bands like Benny Marty, you know, like Orchestra Aragon, these great Afro-Cuban bands, and he fell in love with the music. And when they came back, they decided that you know, they were going to combine the two forms. And of course, Dizzy Gillespie really introduced the conga drum into jazz when he brought Chano Pozo, the Afro-Cuban, this cold black Afro-Cuban that came up here with it. And you can hear him on the albums. Listen to the album Cubano Beat, Cubano Bop. You know, that's where you will hear the real beginnings of Cubop, of Latin jazz. You know, and then listen to Machito and his Afro-Cubans. Yeah.
So when I think of Uptown, I think of like this. All the Afro-Latin flavor to me is in Upper Manhattan. Uptown. Sorry. So you have the hip hop in the South Bronx, but Latin jazz and salsa came from El Barrio, which is Spanish Harlem, East Harlem. But then you also had
by the time you came along, a lot of it was in the Bronx.
Yeah. I know. But I'm just talking about the history of it, because I'm like, first it was Latin jazz, then it was Boogaloo, and Boogaloo was like Puerto Rican. It was like it came from Puerto Ricans being around Black Americans.
And blues. Yeah, it was a mixture. Yeah,
and then you had salsa music. To my understanding of it was salsa. Well, that was in the '60s, and salsa music and hip hop was like strong in the '70s. I mean, hip hop was invented in the '70s, but wasn't salsa also invented in the '70s?
No. Salsa is mambo. You know, that's what it is. It's mambo. It's the same. It's the son montuno with a New York vibe to it. You understand? They with more jazz.
So when would you say the salsa came out then? Because salsa is...
Well, people started talking about salsa in the 1960s.
Okay.
You know,
Well, I would say the '70s was the like a strong point for salsa. Especially in the Bronx. So basically, at the time the hip hop came out, it was also to me like a heyday of salsa in the '70s, and it was in the Bronx. It was Uptown. So that's where we are now. We're Uptown. We're in Harlem, Sugar Hill, right across from the South Bronx. And today we're going to talk about the first hip hop record that was ever made. And so my dad was around that in the beginning, and also wrote an article in the first issue of The Source magazine.
Oh yeah, so the Source magazine, which calls itself the Bible of hip hop. In the second edition, I wrote the cover story. It's called Malcolm X, the Original Rapper. This was around the time that Spike Lee's Malcolm X was coming out. So you get Source magazine, you can see it, you know, and I went into rap, you know, and how the traditional rap in the Afro-American community.
And I would love to do a conversation about that. I also did voiceovers for that Malcolm X movie. But the thing is that, you know, recently, I just did a video recently about the role that New Yorkers played in hip-hop, because recently, I don't understand it, but I guess it's like the younger generation or somebody has been trying to say that, like, Latinos had nothing to do with the creation of hip hop, and it is ridiculous. Yeah. And people were attacking Fat Joe.
Some of the greatest break dancers and all. I mean, first of all, blacks and Puerto Ricans over in the South Bronx were like one. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's not like a lot of these other different Latin groups are coming here and they're estranged from it. No, blacks and Puerto Ricans, you know, New Yorkers.
New Yorkers, because it's not
New Yorkers. That's the Puerto Ricans born in New York. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Joe Bataan, you know, who was big in the Boogaloo thing. They were doing Latin tunes. They were singing them in English. You know, Willie Bobo. You know, whom I played with. You know, like conga drums. Well, you can't see them, but I got conga drums all right. I've been playing conga drums, you know, over 50 years. Mm-hmm. In any case, if you go look at my bio, You will see pictures of me playing with Mongo Santa Maria playing. You see me playing, pictures of me playing congas, what have you. And if you go online, you can go online on YouTube and put, Playfell Benjamin jams with Zone del Barrio. This was a legendary, group here. And I'm playing congas with them, and we in El Barrio. We in at Spanish, center. They don't call me El Chocolate Caliente for nothing. And incidentally, that's what they call me among the Hispanics. You understand? My Hispanic, except these Dominicans around here call me El Grande Negro. Which is the big nigga. That's what they call me around here. You understand?
I get what you did.
It's true.
And the funny thing is that even though Black Americans and Puerto Ricans are like this uptown and have an intertwined history and have always created together, where we are right now is heavily Dominican. On the South Bronx, a lot of Puerto Ricans, but in the Heights, a lot of Dominicans. Cardi B, she's from this area. Cardi B's in the Bronx and the Heights. So the Heights is heavily Dominican. And even though Dominicans and Black Americans didn't create together like Puerto Ricans do, we coexist fine. Like me and my twin brother we had Dominican friends, never had an issue with Dominicans. And that's a whole...
See, I have a picture of me dropping, a jab on Muhammad Ali's chin. If you go to my bio, you'll see it. That's the cover picture of me dropping, and like right now I'm 80 years old, but if you don't know what you're doing, you couldn't hit me with a handful of rice. So give it that Floyd Mayweather shoulder roll and knock your ass out if you get careless. But anyway, the thing is that I showed that picture to my barber, who was Dominican. He had a fit. He wanted a copy of it, so he put it on the wall. So when people come in, whenever I come in, he say, "That's the one that's Ali El Chocolate." So people want to know how that picture was made. I said, "Look, me and Ali was hanging out, and we got into an argument about something. And I don't know, he just kept talking. And I said, listen, man, I heard enough of this shit. I don't hear no more of it. And he kept fat mouthing. So I just popped him. You understand what I'm saying? And you look at the picture, you see he trying to get his hands up, but I was a tad too fast. Now, when I tell people that, they look at me like, yeah, you know what I mean, you lying. So my answer is this. For people who think I'm lying, you can go see the picture online. For people who think I'm lying, here's what I say. The great Ali has danced and joined the ancestors. The legendary Philadelphia disc jockey, the mighty burner, Sonny Hobson, who took the picture, well, he had a stroke and he's in an old folks home and he can't talk. So I'm the only one left to tell the story, and that's my story. And whoever don't believe it can kiss my ass. And on top of that, you got the picture. There's the evidence right there. So that's my story. All right. Okay. Anyway.
Okay.
So I'm going to. The topic of our conversation today is how rap records got made and played. How the first rap record got made and played. And you know the first rap record was Rapper's Delight. Okay? Now, that was made on the All Platinum label. That's was Joe Robinson and Sylvia, his wife, Joe and Sylvia Robinson, whom they call the godmother of hip hop. You see this picture? I wish people could see this picture. You see how fly she is? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, the piece I wrote is called How the First Rap Record Got Made and Played. And the subtitle is On Political Players, Black Revolutionaries, and the Business of Music. Now, I'm going to read some of it and then I'm going to talk extemporaneously with my daughter.
Yes.
Okay. The beautiful, shrewd businesswoman and former recording artist Sylvia Robinson, who had a big hit in the 50s as Mickey and Sylvia, is often referred to as the godmother of hip-hop. True enough. But that was made possible because on the quiet tip, her husband, Joe Robinson, was a big-time gangster. The kind of fearless, tough guy who would tell a cracker sheriff in Mississippi, "Kiss my rich black ass, you cracker motherfucker," while he was in handcuffs. Joe was good friends with a friend of mine, Clarence Mookie Jackson, the legendary Clarence Mookie Jackson, who owned the premier black gangster hangout spot in New York during the 1970s, Miss Lacey's, which was right next door to Carnegie Hall. As a matter of fact, it was one of his flunkies, Manuel, that they rented the car from that they used in Superfly. That was Carl, one of Mookie's flunkies used to hang around. These were for real gangsters, not play hip-hop thugs, play gangsters. For them, being a gangster was not just a lifestyle. It was a business. They were gentlemen gangsters, elegant of style and manners, who wished a different and better life for their kids, like the kind described by Drs. Sinclair Drake and Horace Clayton, the two famous sociologists, black sociologists, in their classic 2-volume sociological treatise on Chicago, Black Metropolis, especially the chapter titled The Upper Shadies, in which they described black gangsters in the 1930s in Chicago who sent their kids to Europe for study. And in the classic memoir, Really the Blues, by the Chi-Town Jewish gangster and Al Capone strongman Milton Mez Mesro, who became a jazz musician while serving time with black musicians in Illinois' Joliet prison, and got good enough on the clarinet to play with the great Louis Armstrong. In his memoir, Mez compares black gangsters he knew, especially in Harlem, with the top white gangsters he associated with, and he knew them all. Mez described the black gangsters as being far superior in intellect and style to the white gangsters. He said that in a racially just society, they would have been lawyers, doctors, and captains of industry. That's what Joe and Mookie were like. Mookie knew Joe well, knew him before he got a record company. They were cut buddies from way back, before Joe took a numbers district from the mafia. The word on the street was that's how Joe got the money to start the record company. Mookie was the founder of the Fair Play Committee, a group of black gangsters who were inspired by the Black Power movement and the Revolutionary Action movement, which I was one of the founders of.
You going to read the whole thing?
No, that's how I met Mookie. I don't take the name too. That's how I met Mookie. After some of the leaders of the Revolutionary Action movement saw the movie The Battle of Algiers, where the revolutionaries in the Algerian FLN, the National Liberation Front, recruited the Casbah gangsters into the movement, all black ghetto gangsters began to look like potential Malcolm X's to us. Thus, we made an effort to recruit and convert black gangsters into the movement. We used to call Mookie and his associates political players because they wanted to drive white gangsters out of the black community and fund legitimate black-owned enterprises. And they were supported by the militants in the movement, and they supported the militants in the movement. Mookie also knew Malcolm X well enough, all the way back from when Malcolm was in the streets. First in Detroit, where they both came from, and later in Harlem. And he used to say, it's a good thing Malcolm became a political leader because, quote, Malcolm couldn't hustle his way across the George Washington Bridge. That's what he used to say. When the revolutionary activist H. Rap Brown, who along with Stokely Carmichael, a.k.a. Kwame Ture, founded the original Black Panther Party in Lowndes County, Alabama, the Oakland Black Panthers were an offshoot that came along later and coined the Black Power slogan. When he was running from the FBI as a fugitive on their top 10 most wanted list, remaining for large at years, with them unable to find him, it was Mookie and his associates that hid Rap Brown. Although he virtually had no formal education, coming from racist apartheid Birmingham, Alabama, and growing up dirt poor, Mookie was one of the smartest people I ever met. And I have lectured at Harvard and the Sorbonne in Paris. I met some of the smartest people in the world, and he was one of them. Mookie and I became dear friends until he died a natural death in 1985, at 85.
He died at 85?
Yes.
I thought, no, it had to be, it couldn't be 85. I wasn't 4 years old when he died.
He was 85.
No, he was 85. It didn't happen in 1985.
No. He was
said,
no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Until he died a natural death at 85.
Okay.
Yeah. If you read my fictional story, Lush Life, in the seminal anthology Brotherland, which includes 66 black male writers, the largest ever anthology of black male writers, which was compiled and edited by Dr. James Harris, senior editor of the Black Scholar, and the prolific writer and venerable public intellectual Herb Boyd, who also knew Mookie from Detroit. The black gangsters sitting around the table organizing to break into the record business are based on Mookie and his associates. The character Boogie Woogie is based on Mookie, and Beautiful Cody Jones is based on Joe Robinson. So if you want to read this, you can read this. This is a book, an anthology called Brother Man. It has 66 black male writers in it, and I have a piece in there called Lush Life, and that's the piece in which I tell this story, and it's really my recollections of things I witnessed. That's why when Nelson George became the producer of the series American Gangster for BET, that's why he hired me to do one of the sections, because he knew that because he'd read what I'd written about the black gangster scene in New York in 1970s, which I knew because they were in the music business and had this organization called the Fair Play Committee. Now, the Fair Play Committee came into existence because of two things. First of all, independent black record producers couldn't get their records played on the air, and they had to deal with independent distributors. You see, like for instance, when CBS makes a record, they have a distribution system where it can distribute it around the world. If you were an independent, now of course we have the internet now, let's change all that. But before, you had to deal with these independent distributors. And of course, most of them were gangsters, you know, and they were Jewish and Italian, you understand, and they were because you know, people think all Jews are doctors and lawyers. Jews used to be gangsters. Used to be a lot of Jewish gangsters. Bugsy Siegel was a gangster. Meyer Lansky was a gangster. You know, Murder Incorporated was created in the same Brownsville neighborhood where Mike Tyson grew up, and it was a Jewish gang. All right, so Jews.
I never knew there was a gang called Murder Incorporated.
Oh yes,
because you know why? Because there's a record label called Murder Inc.
Yeah, well that's where they get it from. Murder Incorporated. It was a real, and you know, you want somebody taken out, you just call them up, and they were Jews. Right, just like Mez Mesro that I mentioned earlier.
And the other thing about Mez Mesro that I wanted to say, there's a documentary by Fab Five Freddy called Grass is Greener, and in that on Netflix, and he's talking about cannabis prohibition and how it's connected to jazz culture in New Orleans and hip hop. But he talks about how Mez Mesro became the biggest weed dealer in Harlem.
Well, people used to say among the musicians, if somebody wanted to give you some herb, you say, "Is it the real Mez? Is it the real Mez?" He was noted to have the best reefer, you know, in New York, right? And he was a jazz man. He was a Jewish. And
he was in Harlem, and he was from Chicago, a Jew from Chicago.
Yes, he was
in Harlem. He was actually in his neighborhood. He was around the corner from here.
Oh,
they put his address. He was in St. Nicholas on Sugar Hill.
Oh wow!
And he was in the main weed dealer to the.
Well, he fell in love with Afro-American culture. You know, like many other white people, like the woman who married Joyce Schuyler, the Harlem Renaissance writer. She was a beauty queen, a heiress to it all, a fortune and all that. She walked away. She from reading his writing. You know, she fell in love with him. You know, and came all the way from San Francisco to New York to meet him and whatnot. So I mean, you know, people have been fascinated with Harlem culture for a long time. But the thing is that the Fair Play Committee, they came into existence because. Like I said, independent black record labels, producers could not get their records played on air and could not count on getting their money from distributors in a timely fashion and whatnot. So, Oaken and put together the Fair Play Committee. Now, these were gentlemen gangsters, you know, as I have mentioned here earlier when I talked about, you know, if you read A Black Metropolis, and let me just say this: Kanye West say he don't read. And I say that's why he talk like a damn fool 90% of the time. And anybody who think that he does not talk like a damn fool, that's the best evidence you have that you are a damn fool. All right? Because son, if Kanye West ain't a damn fool, eggs ain't groceries, grits ain't poetry, and Mona Lisa was a man. You know, that boy, Bob Marley must have had it in mind when he wrote that song, when he chased this crazy bald head out of town. You understand what I'm saying? Now, if you don't read, there's only so much. When you listen to me talk, and you hear me dropping books all the time, right? Because if you really want to know, if you want to be learned, you have to do some reading. There's no getting around it, all right? Now, so in any case, there was in the 1920s, to give you the quintessential gentleman gangster was a guy named what was his name? He was, the name will come to me. But if any of you saw the movie, if any of you saw the the TV series on Netflix, Boardwalk Empire. If any of you saw that, then this guy who played Dr. Narcisse, this black gangster who was so erudite, you know, who was always quoting, you know, the works of literature and stuff, that's who this is based on, you know. And his name, what is his name? His name sounds Jewish, but I don't usually forget names. But I'm 80 years old. Every now and then I get something.
Yeah, you
but,
really do.
But it will come to me. You understand what I'm saying? In any case, in the 1920s, the Harlem Renaissance. This is a period in which black art flowered. You know, I'm going to do another session with my daughter where I'm going to talk about the black arts movement, and I will connect it historically to the Harlem Renaissance and even the period before that in the 1890s, which was a tremendous period of black creativity. This is when black people invented the Broadway musical. All right,
I didn't even know
you
that.
know, James Weldon Johnson, J. Rosamond Johnson, Bob Cole. You know, they invented the Broadway musical. You know, and James Weldon Johnson was one of the founders of ASCAP. You know, which is the American Society of Composers. That collects all the money, the royalties. You know, for composers and whatnot. But this guy's name keeps coming. It's right on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, the Harlem Renaissance. One of the reasons for the Harlem Renaissance was this is the 1920s now. This is what slavery ended in 1865 at the end of the Civil War. Okay, so from 1865 to 1900 was 35 years, and then 1920 is 55 years. So
yeah.
This is only 50-something years after slavery. You know, when and so they wanted this. This is the age of what they call the New Negro, and what they meant by the New Negro is that there is a generation of black people who come to fruition who were not born in slavery. You know. Who know, as a matter of fact, when you look at Duke Ellington's great tune, Jump for Joy, you know, you see that expresses that feeling of what they call the New Negro, right? There's a lot of talk about it. The quintessential book on this, well, there are many. There's two great books on the history of Harlem, both written by, in this period, both written by black writers. One is written by Dr. David Levering Lewis. It's called When Harlem Was in Vogue. Dr. David Levering Lewis is a two-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize for history. And interestingly enough, both Pulitzer Prizes were won for the 2 volumes he wrote on Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. And that's really quite an achievement. A black scholar winning the Pulitzer Prize for history twice, writing about another black scholar. It's unprecedented. And then there was the great Jervis Anderson, who used to write for the New Yorker, the most prestigious literary journal in the country. He wrote a book called This Was Harlem, you know, and Jervis Anderson was a Jamaican. So he does a great job of painting the picture of the West Indians in Harlem, you know, during the Harlem Renaissance. But the point is that this was a period in which they wanted to show the new Negro. This is who we are. We produce, we have intellectuals, because that was the measure of the civilization of a group. How many intellectuals and artists have you produced? And so the Harlem Renaissance was dedicated to this. And so they used to have the Urban League, which was a young organization at that time, began to have a contest every year in which, you know, black writers, poets, essayists, fiction writers, dramatists would submit pieces, and they would receive cash prizes. Now, the Urban League was headed at that time by Dr. Charles Johnson, you know, a great sociologist who wrote also, who one of the people that followed Du Bois is studying how people is producing great sociological works, and he did a great book on Chicago. But Dr. Charles Johnson in 1920, the Negro in Chicago. So Dr. Charles Johnson was both the head of the Urban League and the editor of their magazine, which was called Opportunity, and that's where they would publish these pieces. This black gangster, you know, who was what they call a policy king. He controlled the numbers business. You know, wasn't no drugs, and it was numbers. You know, community lottery. He controlled it, and he used to put up all of the money for the prizes, for these literary prizes. Black gangsters in Chicago, for instance, Ida B. Wells, you know, heroic woman, a woman who had to leave her home in Memphis, Tennessee, because she owned a newspaper and was writing anti-lynching editorials and going and exposing these lynchings as lies, the reasons they gave for them as lies, and showing how these lynchings, while they were talking about, well, he insulted a white woman or whatnot, what it was really about was that they were afraid of the economic competition they were getting for black men, and the black men they were lynching were the ones who were the most successful. By her publishing these things, they started threatening her life. She had to wear a gun in her office every day. You know, she started wearing a gun. You know, and eventually she just left Memphis and moved to Chicago. But when she moved to Chicago, she's the one who was responsible for the first big theater, black theater in Chicago, where all of the major acts could come. And she did it in conjunction with a black gangster. You understand what I'm saying? She did it in conjunction with a black gangster. I know a lot of stuff you know. I know a lot of stuff don't nobody know.
I know. I know.
But anyway, so this is, and Gus Greenlee in Pittsburgh. He's the one that owned the Homestead Grays, the great black, all-black baseball team. He was a gangster. You know what I'm saying? He was a businessman all over. Don King. And I'm going to talk about him later, because when I talk about Trump later on, I'm going to talk about Trump, you know, because I partied with Trump. You know, I saw that motherfucker right up close, and I'm going to talk about that later on, right? But Don King also was one of the gentleman gangsters. Don King went to Case Western Reserve, the same university that my friend Alan Counter, one of the greatest scientists in the world, went to. You know, so in any case, there's this class of people. Bumpy Johnson is the one that people know best. As a matter of fact, there's a series called The Godfather of Harlem. It's about Bumpy Johnson, right? These black gangsters are people who were, as Mesro noted, these are people who would have been captains of industry. They would have been lawyers. They would have been doctors if they had not been in a racist society that did not allow them to exercise their skills that way. So they were gangsters to make money. See, like right now, these little hip-hop dudes, they done made gangsters and being a gangster into a lifestyle. You know, they're proud of being a thug and looking like they just fell off a motherfucking watermelon truck somewhere. You look at black gangsters in the past, they were sharp. They were fashion plates. You know, they were style setters.
Yeah, because we talk about Mookie, the person you read about. When I was a kid, of course, I didn't know he was a gangster, but he was always fly. He always had on fur coats. Didn't he always have on?
He was like her grandfather, because both of her grandfathers were dead, right? And she remembers him as this very kindly man, old man, or whatever. But
yeah, he was kind. He was funny.
Yeah, he was very funny.
But then when you told me he's from Detroit, it makes sense because Detroit people.
He's from Birmingham, Alabama.
Well, yeah,
and he came to Detroit.
He came to
Detroit.
Detroit.
From Birmingham, yeah.
Okay, well then, but most people from Detroit come from Alabama, so there's a connection because Detroit people love their furs and their jewelry, and I kind of think of Harlem. He was fly.
Mookie had a bunch of fur coats. He was, and the thing is, so these people, at least this class of gentlemen gangsters, they funded businesses in the black community. You know, this was the only way they had of getting money, so they got it. But they didn't want nobody to think of them as thugs. You know, I mean, like, and these guys walk around here, a lot of them look like they just fell off a watermelon truck somewhere. You know, these guys were. Well, I tell you what you do. Look at my pictures in my portfolio, in my bio, because I got a lot of pictures in there, and you'll see, you know, what old school players used to look like. You understand what I'm saying? You'll see, even though I was an intellectual. You understand? when people say that to Cater, people be looking at my pictures. They say, Cater, your daddy look kind of gangster. Cater said, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? My daddy's intellectual. What are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? So anyway.
Yeah, I never paid attention to gangsters. I've never been fascinated by them either.
Yeah, I know, of course not. You know what I mean? But in any case, that's who these guys were, right? So they put together this organization. Now, when I first met Joe Robinson, who put out the first rap record, Rappers Delight, Mookie took me over to his place over in New Jersey. Which is where he had his studio, you know, all platinum records, right? And then it became after that big hit, it became, he changed the name of one of the labels. what was the Sugar Hill? It became Sugar Hill.
I was gonna say, I know the Sugar Hill gang was actually from New Jersey.
Yeah. Well, they were. They were from
even though Sugar Hill's on Sugar Hill.
Yeah, but they were from right over here in Jersey. You know what I'm saying? And so what happened is that Joe, when Mookie introduced me to Joe Robinson had just finished building his studio, and he was so proud of it. He showed us. He said, "Look, I don't not only can record records here, I could actually I can actually press the records, because then it was all vinyl, vinyl business, actual records, and he could do everything. He could do everything except get his records played on the radio and distribute them. So the Fair Play Committee formed to deal with these two problems, right? Now, the Fair Play Committee, like I said, when you see them, they look like Wall Street bankers. And when I first met Joe Robinson, he's sitting behind his desk. He had on this, beautiful banker's gray pen suit, and he was a soft-spoken guy. And you look, the piece that I'm reading from will be online later this evening on Playfell's commentaries, and you could read, and you can see pictures of him. He's elegant. His wife was beautiful. I mean, you see them, you would think, that he was a lawyer, doctor, somebody. But there was a vibe about him, If you've been around gorillas, you can tell. You understand what I'm saying? And so he was there. So I asked Mookie. I said, yo. I said, your boy Joe. He's a real cool customer. He looked like he's a good businessman. I said, but he got he got any gorilla in him. Mookie say, he's the most gorilla-ish motherfucker that I know. And he say, I've been knowing gorilla for 50 years. And Joe Robinson is the most gorilla. And then he told me the story of how Joe Robinson took this Numbers district from the mafia. And that's where he got the money to do this. So this is who Joe Robinson was, who owned Sugar Hill Records, that put out the Sugar Hill Gang. Now here's how. So their problem was, how do we get our records played, and how do we get our money collected? So here's how they solved the problem. I talk about it in the piece. There used to be an organization called NAFTA. I don't know whether it still exists now or not, but it was the National Association of TV and Radio Announcers, and it was the black organization for announcers. Now, those of you who saw the 5 Heartbeats will recall a scene in the 5 Heartbeats where Big Red picks this singer up who asked about his money and dangles him over the balcony, way up off this building, Well, that's what the Fair Play Committee did to some very big names in the black radio business who wouldn't play their records, right? They went down to the conference. Now, Mookie dropped out of school in elementary school. Like I say, he's one of the naturally smartest people I ever met. But Mookie could talk a gopher out his hole. You understand? Mookie could sell ice cubes to Eskimos. Mookie took 14 dudes, all of them gangsters, right? They all dressed like bankers. And they go down to Miami where the convention was being held. Now, mind you, they had just had a race ride in Miami the week before. So Mookie goes down there and he goes straight to the sheriff's office. And he said, now, I know hey, he's talking like this. I know you had some trouble now, and I just want to be helpful. I just want to be of service now. He said, now, a lot of notoriety Negroes hang around this record business. He said, ain't no telling, what could happen over there, it's left to their own. He said, now, I tell you, I know you don't want no more trouble here. And the sheriff said, I really don't want no more race straights. Well, listen, here's how you can avoid any trouble. Deputize me and my men, and I guarantee you we will keep everything under control. So he talked the sheriff into deputizing this group of New York gangsters.
And this is in Miami?
In Miami, yeah. And who was there? Logan Westbrooks. Logan Westbrooks, who was the first person who created the black music department at CBS. I'm talking about him again in a minute. But the thing is that, so they went down there and they terrorized the conference. What they did was, they got, I could call them by name, say some big people. One of them was Frankie Crocker. Another one was a guy named Del Shields. Another one was a guy named Rocky G. These were all the biggest guys in black radio. took them to a room, hung a couple of them off the balcony the way you saw they did in the Five Heartbeats, and they suddenly start playing their records. That's how it got, that's why the Sugar Hill Gang got played, because nobody had ever heard of anything called rap music. They were doing that in clubs and out here on playgrounds and whatnot, But Joe recorded that stuff and got it played on the radio. Now the thing is that so that's how they handle that. About the distributors, there used to be different kinds of independent record distributors. There was one kind called one-stops. That's because you could get, some distributors handle rhythm and blues, some handle rock, some handle country. One-stops, you could get any kind of record that you wanted from a one-stop. So this guy here owned one of the biggest one-stops, right? And he was a Jewish gangster. He was a half-ass gangster. He had gangster connects anyway. They snatched his ass coming out of his office and brought him up to a hotel room. And they told him, they read the riot act to him. Told him, we want our money on time and whatnot. And he started to give them some lip. Mookie had a dude called JJ. JJ was about 6'6" and 240 pounds of muscles. Mookie said, hey, that guy don't really understand what's going on. It's a different day now. Throw his ass out the window. We were up on the 4th floor in the hotel, and JJ went and grabbed this guy and took him to the window and threw his ass out the window, right? But Tabby, who was Mookie's real muscle, was downstairs. Tabby had given the 5 guys in the firehouse a couple of $100 to let him rent one of them nets that people who jumping from a fire jump in the net. He paid him a couple of $100 to let him rent this net for an hour. And he just got some derelicts off the street, gave him $30 and $50 a piece, and they standing outside holding the net, and when the guy threw this dude out the window, he thought he was dead. He was spinning. He went down and he hit that net, but he had a heart attack. He didn't die.
Oh, wow.
But they had no more trouble out of him. You understand? They had no more trouble getting their money out of him, right? That's how they broke into these independent labels, managed to get into, and that's how Joe Robinson got the record on the air. But before that, let me just say this: how did he get to make the first hip hop record? How he got into the rap business? Because his company started. His first big hit was like Cuba Gooding's daddy. What was it? Ray Brown and Gooding and Brown or something like that. It was a rhythm. He was in rhythm and blues, right? And what happened was this: Mookie was also a part owner of Harlem World, this club that you hear Puffy and them talk about all the time. That this is where they perfected, their hip hop skills in Harlem World and whatnot.
Puffy says that?
Oh yeah, all of them say it. Harlem World in the early days, that was the place, and Mookie was one of the owners of it. So what had happened was, like I said, I got involved in it because I was trying to get in the music business, and at the time I was the manager for Doug and Gene Kahn, right? And then when they broke up, I ended up putting together a band and had a touring band with Gene. It was Gene Kahn and Jay. The name of my band was Jay. So me and Shelman Johnson, very talented pianist, out in Brooklyn. Shelman wrote some tunes. I wrote some lyrics to him, and our intention was to make an album. Now we were looking at people. I mean, like my idea of songwriting was like Tommy Bell and Linda Creed, who wrote Bet You by Golly Wow. There's a spark of magic in your eyes. Candyland appears each time you smile. Never thought that fairy tales come true, but they come true when I'm near you. You a genie in disguise, full of wonder and surprise. Oh, bet you by golly wow, you the one I've been waiting for forever. That's the kind of lyrics I wanted to write, right? And so we were concentrating on writing strong songs, and some of them with a dance beat because this was the disco era. We didn't see this new thing that was coming, this rap, this hip hop. This was the disco. We trying to write beautiful songs, with danceable music, and we wanted to be a contained group like Earth, Wind, and Fire, like have our singers and musicians all together. So I had an 8-piece band. We played Lincoln Center. We played a lot because Jean was big. She blew up. This is when, she was the greatest singer in America, but she had a big hit called Free Love that was on the CBS record. Now, let me just say a bit about this whole CBS, because she was on Philadelphia International with Gamble and Huff. Now, Philadelphia International was created by Logan Westbrook. I'm talking about the business side of it. The artistic side was Kenny Gamble, Kenny Gamble, Tommy Bell, and Leon Huff. Those three. But they were independent producers, and they were producing hit records for people all over. Logan went to him and said, look, why don't you all I tell you, he made a deal with them. This was one of the first boutique labels in the record business. He said to them, tell you what, why don't you get your own label, and you can hire, you can choose all the acts, you do all the production. All we want is for you to bring us the finished master. And for every finished master you bring us, we'll give you $1 million up front. Now, Clive Davis, who was the head of CBS Records, Clive was a graduate of Harvard Law School, who was a great music lover. So he ended up in charge of all of CBS Records. If you read Clive Davis's autobiography, you will see he says that after they signed this deal with Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, he said before the ink dried, they had sold 9 million records. And Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff and Tommy Bell, that team wrote 100 different tunes that were either platinum or golden records. And their publishing company, Mighty 3 is the name of the publishing company, was one of the richest in the business. It ended up being worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Because the tunes that Tommy Bell wrote Tommy Bell wrote with Linda Creed. She was the lyricist, and she was a Jewish girl, a poet, a wonderful lyricist. She's the one that wrote the lyrics to Bet You By Golly Wow, and they wrote for the Felipe Wynn and the what's the name of the group? One of the biggest groups out there. They had Teddy Pendergrass, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, the OJs, all of these, the Sweet Inspiration, all these groups just hit after hit after hit. And Jean, when they signed Jean, first record they made with her, Free Love, blew up, and that's when I had the band with her. Now it turns out that Logan Westbrook, who was the head of CBS, he created the first black music division in a major Fortune 500 communications company. Logan signed Earth, Wind, and Fire. He signed Sly and the Family Stone. He put together the Philadelphia International deal. He made a lot of money. That's right, he's living in a glass-sided mansion out in the mountains out there in L.A. right now, you know what I mean? I went out there a couple of years ago and wrote a piece on him because he was selected in the Living Legends. He was given the Living Legends Award. The Living Legends Award is an award that's given to people on the music side of the business, who did great things on the business side on the business side of music. And so he was given, a Pioneers Award as a living legend, and I wrote a photo essay on the whole thing, which you could also be able to find, on my site. It's down now, but I'm putting them up because I'm changing sites. So but every piece that I mentioned, I will put them up within the next day, so you can see them if you wish. So I met Logan, and Logan and I, because we had a mutual friend, Ulysses S. Kilgore III, who is well, Killer is a master with finances. Killer at one point was the head of cost accounting for all of Pfizer chemicals. It's a bad brother, and him and Logan went to Lincoln in undergraduate school. They went to Lincoln of Missouri. And so he introduced me to Logan. So we kind of hit it off, from the very beginning. I'm trying to get in the music business, I'm telling him. So he told me, okay, when you got a demo, bring it over here, and I'm going to hook you up with the top producer over here in my department with this guy named Hank Cosby. He had been with Motown, right? And he produced a lot of hit records with Motown. So we made a deal with a group out in Brooklyn, the Restoration. They had they built a studio and they called themselves the Sounds of Brooklyn, and they wanted to rival the Sounds of Philadelphia. It never really happened, but our band became the house band. We played for all of these different acts, and in return they gave us free studio time, and we did this album. But when I took the album over to CBS, and Logan hooked me up with this guy, Hank Cosby, he listened to it. I let him hear a tune called Just Keep On Dancing. And because I was a former history professor and whatnot, I had a history of black dance and music in this song, Just Keep On Dancing, because disco had come about. And you had all these white folks like Danny Terrio and all them out there on these dance shows out there doing the Frug or whatever they was doing, to this boring disco music that was done by, done with a, whatchamacallit, they put the TikTok on and they would play it directly on this beat. That's why it all sounds alike. Not to say that there were no great, to me, the greatest tune of the hip hop era was not hip hop, disco era was Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive, And I didn't really recognize how powerful that was until I saw Dave Lampell do this show in which he responded to the people who were trying to say that he was anti-LBQ, whatever it is, anti-gay, And at the end of it, he played, it just came on, I Will Survive. And I listened to it, and I saw why it was such a big hit. But anyway, the guy listened to our demo, and he said to me, listen, you got a funky rhythm section here, and you are a very clever lyricist. I tell you what, he said, I'm not interested in this project, but if you take this rhythm section you got, take this tune, write me about 4 more stanzas of these kind of lyrics, and get one of them kids in the clubs to recite them over this rhythm track, I'd be interested in that. Now, this is before there was any such thing as a rap record. I didn't even know what the hell he was talking about. First of all, my jaws got tight. I said, this guy's an idiot. He want me to throw away all my singers and my horns, and I done produced a masterpiece here, and the hell with him. So I left out of there with an attitude. But later that evening, I was with Mookie, and I was telling him about it. And Mookie said, oh, he talking about them hippity-hop boys, them rappers. I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, we got 2 of the best of them in the city, right over at the club. Come over to the club tonight. I'll let you in. He said, if you like them, I'll get them to do your record for free. So I go over there. You know who was on the mic? DJ Hollywood and what's his name? The guy that did basketball. One of the biggest, turned out to be one of the biggest guys in hip hop.
I never heard DJ Hollywood before.
Yeah, well, DJ Hollywood was one of the very early ones, but the other one I'm talking about, you would remember him right away. If any of you all remember who I'm talking about, who did the tune basketball, he blew up real big, right? But I went over there and I listened to that and I said, is this what he's talking about? I said, this shit, we've been doing this shit since I was a kid. I've been out on the corner, with stuff like I was born in the barrel of butcher knives, and they were starting down with 45s. I eat the meat and bury the bone and put a chump out his home, eat the bone, bury the meat, run his homeboys down the street. Brahma bulls have charged me, never pierced my hide. Cobra snakes have bit me, crawl the fuck off in the bushes and die. I said, I've been doing that kind of stuff since I was a kid.
And so let me say something about that, which is one of the things that annoys me too, because like there have been some Jamaicans that try to say Jamaicans created hip hop, and it's like Jamaicans did not create hip hop.
No, Jamaicans have something they call dub. You know what I mean? But see, the thing about it is, all that Jamaican music, you listen to reggae, very much influenced by rhythm and blues. And they'll tell you that. The people who really know about the music, but they have this.
Curtis Blow.
They have Curtis Blow. That's exactly who I'm talking about. Curtis Blow.
Yeah.
Curtis Blow was on the mic. I listen to that stuff. I say, that stuff ain't going nowhere. This guy's crazy. And so I just played passing. But 3 weeks later, Joe Robinson and his wife came by the club. They were out. It was his birthday, and they just stopped by there to see Mookie. And they saw Curtis Blow. See, I was concerned about being an artist. You know, I was concerned about artistic integrity. Joe Robinson saw a potential hit. And what he did was to think, maybe we ought to record this stuff, you know. Now, he didn't do it with Curtis Blow. He did it with some people, a local group from New Jersey, from his town, you know, and called itself the Sugar Hill Gang. And somebody had brought them to his wife. You know, that's why they call her the godmother of hip-hop, because she's the one that brought him the group, the Sugar Hill Gang. And what they do, you see, like Logan had this method. These guys, they may not know, well, she know about music because she had a big hit record called Love is Strange in the 50s when I was in high school, you know. So it was called Mickey and Sylvia. You know, you probably can look them up. It was a big hit. So she knew music, but he knew she had an ear for music. But plus, they watched the kids in the club, the way they were responding to these DJs. And they thought, this is some new shit here that's going to happen. And they decided they were going to be the first ones to put this stuff on vinyl. And that's how the Sugar Hill Gang came to be recorded. And by the time he recorded them, he already had the distribution set up. He already had the connection with the radio by virtue of the actions they took a couple of years before that I just described. And that's how the first rap record got made and played.
So, when you were talking about Harlem World, when I was just looking up online, I don't see any connection to Puffy to Harlem World. He used to say Harlem World all the time in the songs, but I don't see any connection to that club with him. Like, I mean, I can't find it.
Well, he talked about everybody went by there. They would go by. I mean, I don't know why there would be any connection. He was talking about they would go by there and watch. They would go by there and watch. You understand what I'm saying? That's where the shit was happening. You know? So I mean, Puffy wasn't really a rapper. Puffy was a businessman. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, because that concert at City College that killed those people, I was a kid when that happened.
Yeah. I thought he was finished. The fact that he came through that. But yeah, so Harlem World was the spot, you know, for hip hop in the beginning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because most people I know had never heard of Harlem World, that club. Yeah.
So that's how the first rap record got made and played, and Joe Robinson and Sylvia Robinson were the ones who did it, you know, and that's how it came about. Because usually when people talk about rap, they always talk about the artistic side of it, you know, who did the big beats first, and who started scratching, and who, you know, and that kind of thing, you know. But nobody ever talks about how did they ever get this record. Russell Simmons says he was shocked when he heard it on the radio. Russell Simmons said he was heartbroken. He said because he thought that, because Russell Simmons was, see, here's the thing about Sugar Hill Gang. They were viewed as perpetrators here in New York. I mean, because the real hip hop was here, you know, with people like, you know, a DJ Red Alert, you know, and it was in the Bronx. You know what I'm saying? You know, Melly Mel and the Furious Five. All those big acts, Big Daddy Kane, they all came out, and they were all, everybody, Russell Simmons was promoting hip-hop shows in New York, you know what I'm saying? And so when Russell said he thought there was only going to be one record made, you know, one rap record made, and he wanted to be the one to do it, you know, and he was going to have all these different acts on the album. When he heard the Sugar Hill Gang, he said his heart just sank. He thought, you know, I'm done. You know what I'm saying? Somebody beat me to the punch. Nobody didn't know where they came from. Nobody here in New York didn't even know who they were. Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation. You know, these are the people who were the creators of hip hop, and they didn't know anything about these guys. And at first, and plus, if you listen to the lyrics on Rapper's Delight, and you listen to the lyrics that came out of New York, you know what I'm saying? You will see how much deeper, you know, they were, because these guys, you know, who did Rapper's Delight, they were suburban guys over there in New Jersey. The South Bronx was a terrible place when hip hop came into being. South Bronx was an urban wasteland. South Bronx was a classic example of what is called the post-industrial wasteland, the post-industrial city, where all of these cities, what caused cities to flourish was manufacturing, factories, you know, that employed large groups of people who were not highly educated but could make a good living wage. When these factories moved out, when they began to move to China, when the Chinese after the defeat of the Cultural Revolution.
We're gonna have to go into the second video because it's about to stop in 15
Okay,
seconds.
and the death of Mao Zedong. All right, I talk. Go ahead.
So we're gonna continue in video number 2. So join us in the second video because the camera's about to run out, and I want to ask about some questions about the Sugar Hill Gang too. So see you guys in the second video.